Why would a boy give away the only dinner he had waited 4 days to eat? That was the question floating in the air the night everything changed, though no one said it aloud. Outside Doyle's diner, rain hammered the windows with such force that the neon signs stuttered in red and blue, as if even the light was shivering. Inside, under that unsteady glow, 18-year-old Malik Carter stood at the counter with a warm plate in his hands and hunger in his stomach. And he was staring at two strangers whose quiet despair was heavier than the storm behind them. He did not know their names yet. He did not know why the woman's voice trembled each time she apologized for losing her wallet, or why the man kept offering a gold pocket watch instead of admitting defeat. He did not know that the napkin he was about to hand them would end up inside a file with his name embossed at the top. All he knew was that something inside him whispered, "Don't let them walk back out into that storm alone." And so he stepped forward. The act took only a moment. The consequences would echo across years. "Jenna, is that couple still here?" Malik asked softly. The waitress turned from the register just as a clap of thunder shook the glass doors. Her ponytail bounced with the movement. "Still here?" she said, lowering her voice, "and still trying to figure out how to pay for 2 teas." Malik glanced at table 7. The older man sat stiffly, his hands folded as if he belonged somewhere more elegant than a diner with flickering lights. The woman beside him rubbed her forehead tiredly before whispering, "Edwin, I swear it was in my purse." "I know, Helena. We'll sort it out," he murmured, though the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. Jenna approached them again, offering a sympathetic smile. "I'm really sorry, but Mr. Doyle can't comp meals tonight. We've had 3 cancellations because of the storm and—" "We understand," Helena interrupted, though her voice broke on the word understand. "It's just embarrassing." Malik felt something inside him pull. He looked down at his dinner tray, his burger, his fries, his moment of triumph after a week of saving every spare coin, and then back at the couple who had already begun to rise. "All right," Frank Doyle said as he stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "We'll need the table cleared for the next customers." "But Frank, there are no next customers," Jenna whispered. "I know," he replied gently, "but rules keep the lights on." Helena nodded and reached for the door. Rain slammed against it immediately, loud enough to make her flinch. That was when Malik moved. He didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't remind himself he hadn't eaten a full dinner in days. His feet simply brought him forward. "Excuse me, ma'am, sir," he said. "Please wait." The couple turned. Malik lifted the tray slightly, his voice almost apologetic. "You don't have to go back into that storm like this. Please, have this." A beat of stunned silence settled between them. The man blinked. "Young man, that is clearly your dinner." "It's all right," Malik said. "It's warm. You need it more than I do." Helena shook her head quickly. "No, sweetheart. We can't take your food." "You'd be doing me a favor," Malik insisted. "I was going to eat alone. Now the meal will have company." The corners of Helena's eyes softened. "That's not how favors work." "Maybe not everywhere," Malik replied, "but that's how they work where my grandmother raised me." A tiny laugh escaped her, surprised and shaky. Edwin exhaled slowly, as though some unseen weight had shifted. "All right," he said, "if you insist." They returned to the booth and Malik slid in across from them. Moments later, Jenna arrived with a fresh pot of tea. "I called Ricky," she told them quietly. "The mechanic. He'll be here in a few minutes." "Thank you," Edwin said, then turned back to Malik. What's your name, son? Malik. Malik Carter. And how old are you, Malik? 18. And you work here? Dish station, Malik said, lifting his hands. They stay pruny. Helena smiled gently. Are you in school? Yes, ma'am. Roosevelt High. I'm trying to keep my grades up. Maybe college one day. What would you want to study? She asked. Malik hesitated. He hadn't told many people. Not even Miss Evelyn, not really. But something about Helena's voice felt safe. Business, he said. But the kind that does something. You know, the kind that helps neighborhoods that people forget about. Edwin leaned forward. What would you change if you could? Malik blinked, surprised by how much he wanted to answer. Riverside Mall, he said finally. It's dead space now, but it could be so much more. A place for kids to study, a clinic, maybe training programs. Just possibilities. Helena exchanged a quick look with Edwin, a flicker so brief Malik almost missed it. Before he could dwell on it, the diner door opened, letting in a gust of wind and a soaked figure shaking off rain. That your car? Ricky Torres asked, pointing outside. Yes, Edwin replied. Ricky glanced Malik's way. Battery was just loose, he said. Could have been knocked out or pulled out. Hard to say. Edwin stood, and in that moment, his exhausted posture seemed to straighten into something sharper, more commanding. How much do I owe you? He asked. Not much, Ricky began, but Edwin was already reaching into his coat, pulling out a thick wallet Malik hadn't seen before. Helena caught Malik's startled look and offered a soft apology with her eyes. When the couple returned to the booth, Edwin placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. You gave up more than dinner tonight, he said. People show who they are in moments like this. You've shown something rare. Malik, unsure what to say, simply nodded. Frank appeared with a fresh plate. Here, he said gruffly. Respect deserves dinner. Don't argue with me. Jenna leaned closer. There was something strange about them, Malik, especially when that wallet came out. Malik looked toward the door where the couple had left, disappearing into darkness. For a moment, the storm felt quieter than before, as though it were holding its breath. He picked up his fork slowly. Somehow, the food didn't taste like a reward anymore. It tasted like the beginning of something he wasn't sure he understood. The storm had eased by morning, leaving the sky the soft gray of a damp dishcloth wrung out and hung above the town. Malik Carter woke before the small alarm clock beside his bed could ring. It rarely needed to do its job. Years of early shifts had trained his body to rise on instinct. He blinked at the familiar ceiling above him, the faint crack that curved along the plaster like a slow-moving river. Another day beginning in the only room he had ever truly called his own. The house on Elm Street was quiet, the way all old houses are in the first hour of morning. The boards knew how to creak in soft agreement, and the walls held the warmth of the night like a promise. Malik swung his legs over the side of his bed and sat there for a moment, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. His stomach ached with the dull emptiness he had carried for several days. But he had learned long ago that hunger was not the first task of the day. Discipline was. He stood and moved silently toward the hallway, careful not to wake Miss Evelyn if she was still resting. But as he reached the living room, he found her exactly as he expected, settled in her recliner with her eyes closed, breathing shallowly, the oxygen tank beside her humming softly. It was only when he bent down to tuck the blanket around her legs that her lips curved ever so slightly. "You're up early again," she whispered without opening her eyes. You were awake, he said. I was pretending not to be. Didn't want you worrying before sunrise. Malik smiled at her stubbornness. Miss Evelyn had a way of saying things as though they were laws written in stone. She believed in sweeping the porch even if no one came by, in ironing clothes even when no one could see the wrinkles, in carrying dignity the way other people carried wallets. She had raised him to understand that pride was not something you needed money for. He brewed her a cup of tea, the cheap kind that smelled weak but warm, and placed it gently on the table beside her. She blinked, fully awake, and looked him over. You didn't eat enough last night, she said. I can hear it in your voice. Malik hesitated. I had enough. Enough is not the same as full, she murmured. He knew she would not pry, and he was grateful. He did not want her to know that last night's dinner had gone to two strangers who looked like they were running out of options. He did not want her to know that even after Frank handed him a replacement plate, he still felt like he had given away something that mattered more than he admitted. But he also knew she would have approved. She always did when kindness cost something. Miss Evelyn lifted her tea. If you don't eat breakfast, at least take an apple. It's not much, but it's something. Yes, ma'am, Malik whispered. I'll take one. He slipped the apple into his worn backpack, alongside schoolwork and the scholarship brochures Miss Hartwell had given him. He had not told Miss Evelyn about those brochures. He could not bear the idea of putting hope on a woman who already carried too much. College had numbers that scared him. Tuition totals, housing fees, book costs. They crowded pages like a swarm of tiny, impossible mountains. Stepping out into the cool morning, Malik felt the familiar resistance of the porch railing beneath his hand. The paint had faded into a pale yellow, the color of old newspapers, and the steps sagged slightly in the middle. Still, it was home. It was clean. It was theirs. He started the long walk toward Doyle's diner. The distance was a little more than 3 miles, but it felt shorter after years of walking it. His shoes were thin at the soles, and the pavement still held the memory of last night's rain. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. Along the way, he passed homes with well-kept lawns and decorative lanterns that glowed cheerfully even in the gray morning. Then the scenery shifted, block by block, into cracked sidewalks, rusted fences, and stray cats searching trash cans. Farther along, he passed the empty skeleton of Riverside Mall. The windows had long since gone dark, and the walls felt like abandoned promises. Still, Malik always slowed down when passing it, imagining what it could become if someone cared enough. When he reached the diner, Frank greeted him with his usual nod, the kind of greeting that said more than words needed to. Jenna waved from behind the counter with a smile that already held the flavor of rumor. "You eating something this morning?" she asked. "Not hungry yet," Malik lied. "Uh-huh," Jenna said knowingly. Funny thing about hunger. It usually shows itself around the same time you stop lying to yourself. Malik laughed softly. "I'll be fine." He tied his apron behind his back and stepped into the dish station. Steam greeted him immediately, rising from the industrial sink in warm clouds. Plates clattered, water splashed, and the rhythm of the morning shift began to settle into his bones. He washed plate after plate, aware of how rough his palms were becoming. He lifted his hands into the light for a moment, studying the lines and calluses. Sometimes he wondered if the hands of college students looked different, softer, less tired. During a brief break, he headed to Roosevelt High. The school's hallways echoed with the usual sounds: lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, laughter that rose and fell like flocks of birds. Ms. Hartwell caught him after class. "Malik, did you think any more about those scholarship forms?" she asked. He touched the strap of his backpack, feeling the hidden weight of the brochures. "Not yet," he said, "still trying to figure things out." "That's good," she said, offering a warm smile. "Figuring things out is a step forward." He nodded, and before he could leave, she added, "You have something a lot of students don't, Malik. You care. Don't underestimate how far that can carry you." Later, during lunch, Malik sat at a table alone for a moment, breathing in the cafeteria air, the mix of reheated pizza and too many conversations winding into a single sound. He thought of the elderly couple from the night before. He wondered where they were now, whether they had found somewhere warm, whether they were still embarrassed by the moment he had tried to soften. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Habit taught him which hungers could be postponed. What he did not know, what no one in that cafeteria could have guessed, was that somewhere across town, inside a luxury hotel suite, his name was already spoken aloud more than once. A file with photographs, school reports, neighbor testimonies, and scribbled notes lay open on a table. The couple from the diner were reading through it line by line, and they would not stop until they had decided how far this young man's kindness might reach. The afternoon light slanted through the diner windows in thin, tired stripes, the kind of light that made dust look like slow-moving stars. After school, Malik returned to Doyle's diner for his evening shift, slipping past the clatter of forks and the hum of small conversations. The storm from the night before had left the world washed, but unsettled, and the air still carried the scent of lingering rain. Malik tied his apron, tightened the knot behind his back, and headed straight to the dish station. He worked quietly, letting the rhythm settle him. Scrape, rinse, stack, repeat. The warm water soothed the cold that had crept into his fingers during the walk to the diner. As he lifted a stack of plates, he overheard Jenna whispering near the counter with two regular customers. Her voice had the cautious excitement of someone who had seen something unusual but was trying to make sense of it. "I'm telling you," she said. "I watched the whole thing. They came in soaked, claiming they had lost their wallet, and then when the mechanic walked in, like magic, the old man pulls out a wallet thicker than the Sunday paper." One of the customers chuckled. "Maybe he found it in his other coat pocket." "No," Jenna said firmly. "This felt different, like he wasn't supposed to show it. And that napkin Malik gave him? He folded it as carefully as a letter from the president." Malik felt heat rise to his cheeks. He didn't want people talking about him as if he had done something extraordinary. The truth was simpler. He saw two people in trouble and acted the way Miss Evelyn had taught him. There was no need to turn it into a story. But some stories have a way of growing even when the person in the center doesn't want attention. Frank appeared beside him, carrying another stack of dishes. "You did good last night," he said, his voice low, steady. "Not everyone your age would give up their only proper meal of the week." Malik shrugged. It wasn't a big thing. Frank set the plates down and looked at him with an expression that suggested he saw through the deflection. "Maybe not to you. But sometimes the things we don't think are big end up being the ones people remember." Malik didn't answer. He focused on the dishes, letting the warm water swallow the moment. As the evening grew darker, customers trickled in and out, their conversations drifting like loose threads. A bus driver talking about road closures, a mother calming a restless toddler, A man at the counter complaining about rising prices. Ordinary life with its steady heartbeat. But for Malik, something felt out of tune. Every time the diner door opened, a breeze carried a sensation that was both familiar and unsettling, like the echo of a question he hadn't yet asked himself. The couple from last night occupied his thoughts more than he expected. He replayed their faces, the woman's trembling hands, the man's sudden authority when speaking to the mechanic, and the strange way he wrote Malik's name on a napkin as if it belonged in a ledger rather than on a scrap of paper. It was not pride or regret that lingered. It was curiosity wrapped in a thin thread of confusion. When his break time arrived, Malik stepped outside. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement. Streetlights shimmered on puddles like pale lanterns guiding the way home. He leaned against the brick wall of the diner, holding the apple Miss Evelyn had slipped into his bag that morning. He took a small bite, feeling the crunch echo gently in his ears. Across the street, an elderly woman struggled with 2 grocery bags as she tried to unlock her front gate. Malik crossed over without thinking. "Let me help you, Mrs. Langley," he said. "Oh, Malik, dear," she sighed with relief. "These bags weigh more every year." He carried them inside for her, placing each one carefully on the kitchen counter. Mrs. Langley patted his hand. "You're a good boy," she said softly. "Your grandmother raised you right." As Malik walked back toward the diner, her words hovered behind him like a gentle shadow. He wondered whether kindness was really a big deal or simply a small thing repeated often enough to matter. Inside, the evening rush began. Plates moved across the counter, the grill hissed, and the diner filled with the warm noise of dinnertime conversations. Malik returned to work, falling back into the familiar rhythm. Later, when the dinner crowd thinned, Jenna approached him with a look that suggested she had been saving something to say. "I called Ricky again," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to pry, but he told me something odd." Malik set down the mixing bowl he had been drying. "What did he say?" "He said there was another car waiting near the broken one last night, a black sedan. He thought it might have been a private driver, and he thought he heard the older man mention something like foundation protocols." Malik frowned. "Foundation?" "That's what Ricky said. He didn't understand it either." Before he could respond, Frank called them both to help wipe down the tables. Jenna slipped back to the front, leaving Malik with more questions than answers. His shift ended an hour later. He stepped out into the night once more, backpack slung over his shoulder. Elm Street stretched ahead of him, quiet except for the occasional bark of a distant dog. He walked the long road home, the cold settling into his bones, but his thoughts warming him with restless searching. When he reached his house, he found Miss Evelyn sitting in her recliner, a blanket across her lap and the television glowing in front of her. A reporter's voice murmured through the speakers, mentioning something about charitable foundations and community investments. The words seemed to flicker in the air like a firefly caught in the dark. "You look tired," she said as he stepped inside. "It was a long shift," Malik answered, dropping his backpack by the door. "You gave something away last night," she continued, her voice soft but certain. "And today, you're carrying the weight of the gift instead of the joy." He rested his hands on the back of the recliner. "I don't know why I'm thinking about it so much. They were just 2 people who needed help." Miss Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes reflecting a wisdom born from years of struggle. "Baby, sometimes people walk into our lives disguised as need, and sometimes the help we give them comes back wearing a different face." Malik opened his mouth to ask what she meant, but she gently tapped his hand. "Sleep on it," she whispered. "The morning will tell you more than the night ever will." He nodded and headed toward his room, but as he closed the door, he could not shake the feeling that something had already begun unfolding, even if he couldn't yet see its shape. Across town, in a quiet hotel suite far removed from Elm Street, a pair of hands turned a page in a thick file labeled Malik Carter, and the reading continued deep into the night. Morning arrived quietly, the way it always does in neighborhoods where people wake before the sun. But something about this particular morning felt different to Malik. Even before he opened his eyes, a faint uneasiness drifted behind his thoughts, like a whisper he couldn't quite catch. He stretched beneath the thin blanket, listening to the familiar creaks of the old Elm Street house. Miss Evelyn was already stirring in the living room, humming a tune that had no beginning and no end. It was the sound she made when she sensed that something was shifting in the world around them. Malik dressed slowly, tugging his jacket tight against the chill that still lingered from the storm. As he laced his shoes, he caught himself thinking about the elderly couple in the diner. Helena's shaking hands, Edwin's gentle gratitude, the way he had folded that napkin as if it were a legal document instead of a scrap Malik had set beside the ketchup dispenser. Most of all, he remembered the moment Edwin's voice changed in front of the mechanic. It wasn't the voice of a helpless traveler. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. He stepped into the kitchen. Miss Evelyn had already set a cup of tea on the table for him. It was the same blend she always used, cheap, thin, but comforting in the way warm water is comforting when someone prepares it with care. "You didn't sleep well," she said, without looking at him. "No," Malik admitted. She nodded as though she had expected that answer. Storms don't end just because the rain stops. Sometimes the afterpart is louder. Malik smiled faintly. "I think I'm just overthinking." She murmured, giving him a knowing look. "Or maybe you're under-listening." He finished the tea, thanked her, and left for his morning shift. The walk to Doyle's diner felt slower than usual. The streets were still dark, and puddles clung to the edges of the sidewalks like small mirrors reflecting the streetlights. The world smelled of wet asphalt and quiet secrets. Inside the diner, Frank was already behind the counter, pouring himself a mug of coffee. "You're early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," Malik replied. Frank studied him for a moment. "Still thinking about last night?" "A little." "Well, don't," Frank said, though his tone softened. "Sometimes things are exactly what they look like." Jenna, wiping down the pastry case, snorted softly. "Or sometimes they're the opposite of what they look like." Malik lifted an eyebrow. "Meaning?" She leaned closer. "Ricky sent a text this morning. He said he saw something strange after he left the diner last night." "What did he see?" "A second car," Jenna whispered. "A black one, looked expensive, and a man in a suit standing beside it like he was waiting for someone." Malik paused, trying to understand. Waiting for who? Ricky doesn't know, but he swears he heard the old man, Edwin, say something about foundation procedures while they were outside. "Foundation procedures?" Malik repeated slowly. The word struck him as odd, too formal for a stranded couple trying to find a ride home. Before he could think further, a group of early customers pushed through the door, bringing in a rush of cold air and the morning's ordinary concerns. Malik slipped into his apron and moved toward the sink, but his thoughts didn't settle. Every time he tried to make sense of what Jenna said, he remembered the heavy wallet Edwin pulled out, the sudden authority in his voice, the gold emblem on Helena's portfolio. "Foundation," he murmured under his breath. The word didn't fit with anything he knew about them. By mid-morning, Malik was on his way to school. He walked the familiar path, passing houses with damp lawns and driveways still glistening from last night's weather. Roosevelt High rose ahead, old brick and peeling paint, sturdy in its own tired way. Students crowded the entrance, holding jackets against the wind and swapping stories about homework and weekend plans. As Malik entered his English classroom, Ms. Hartwell glanced up from her desk. "Malik, may I speak with you for a moment?" He walked over, expecting a question about an assignment. Instead, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I received a call this morning," she said. "Someone asked about you. Not just about your grades, but about your character." Malik blinked. "My character?" "Yes," she said gently. "They knew your grade point average already. They wanted to know if you were the type of student who showed up for others, if you were consistent, if you were the kind of leader people trust." Malik swallowed. "Who called?" "They didn't say," she replied. "But they were professional." Professional. It was the same strange tension he felt when Edwin shifted from helpless traveler to authoritative figure. A chill moved through his chest. During lunch, Tariq waved him over with urgency. "Bro, look at this," Tariq said, flipping his phone around. On the screen was a local news article. It highlighted a philanthropic organization known as the Larkson Community Trust, which managed roughly $240 million in charitable programs across the state. The article mentioned that the trust was beginning a new round of community assessments. Malik felt something settle, slow, heavy, inevitable, into place. Tariq zoomed in on the logo at the top of the article. "That gold symbol," Tariq said. "Didn't you describe something like this last night?" "Yes." The gold emblem on Helena's portfolio. The careful way she guarded it. The way Edwin had folded the napkin, keeping it safe. Malik didn't finish his apple. He couldn't. Later that afternoon, the school loudspeaker crackled to life. "Malik Carter," the voice said, echoing down the hallway. "Please report to Principal Dawson's office." Malik froze. Tariq whispered, "Bro, you in trouble?" "I don't think so," Malik murmured, though uncertainty twisted in his stomach. He walked the hallway slowly. Teachers paused mid-sentence. Students glanced from lockers. The air felt thick, as if holding its breath. He reached the office door. Through the small window, he saw Principal Dawson seated behind his desk, straight-backed, serious. And across from him sat the elderly couple from the diner, no longer in soaked coats, but in elegant tailored clothing. The room seemed brighter around them, as though they carried their own light. Helena held a leather folder on her lap. Edwin was speaking quietly to the principal, his voice steady, confident. Malik realized with a jolt that this was the man's true posture, not the shivering figure from the storm. The secretary looked up. "They're expecting you, Malik." She said it kindly, but the air tightened around his chest. Malik stepped inside. Edwin rose, offering his hand. "Malik," he said, his tone warm but unmistakably authoritative. "Thank you for coming. We have a great deal to discuss." And just like that, Malik understood. This moment was not an accident. He had not simply helped two strangers. He had stepped into something far larger than he knew. The air inside Principal Dawson's office felt still, as if every molecule had paused in place the moment Malik stepped through the doorway. The room was warmly lit, but Malik's palms grew cold against his sides. Edwin and Helena Larkson sat across from the principal, composed, elegant, and absolutely nothing like the fragile travelers they had appeared to be the night before. Their clothes were pressed, their posture steady, their eyes far too aware. "Come in, Malik," Principal Dawson said gently. "Have a seat." Malik lowered himself into the chair closest to the door. His heartbeat was loud enough that he wondered if anyone else could hear it. Edwin folded his hands on the desk and studied him with calm interest. Not the kind of interest one stranger had in another stranger, but something deeper, as though he were examining a puzzle piece he had been waiting to find. "Thank you for coming," Edwin said. "We've wanted to speak with you since last night." Malik swallowed. I didn't do anything special." Helena smiled softly, the kind of smile that suggested she saw right through the deflection. "You did something very few people would do, Malik, especially with so little of your own to spare." Principal Dawson shifted some papers on his desk. "Mr. and Mrs. Larkson represent an organization known as the Larkson Community Trust, one of the largest philanthropic foundations in the state. They oversee a wide range of programs: education, community development, health services, leadership training." Malik blinked. The numbers from the article Tariq had shown him flashed across his memory in quiet disbelief. A trust valued at roughly $240 million. Programs across multiple cities. Partnerships with universities and clinics. Not the sort of thing one imagines when handing a stranger a burger and fries. Helena placed a leather folder on the desk. It made a soft sound as it touched the wood, yet it carried the weight of something far heavier. Inside was a file with a name printed across the top. His name, Malik Carter. "I don't understand," Malik whispered. Edwin leaned forward slightly, his voice even. "We've spent the last several months searching for candidates for a new program. Leaders who already demonstrate integrity, compassion, and community-centered thinking. Whether or not they have titles, whether or not they have privilege. We're not looking for perfect resumes. We're looking for people who make the right choices when no one is watching." Malik's fingers curled hard against the arm of the chair. "And that's what last night was? A test?" "In a way," Helena said gently. "Tests come in many forms. Some are written on paper. Others are written in moments." Principal Dawson nodded. "I received a call this morning asking about your character. They didn't need information about your grades. They already had them." Malik frowned. "Then what did they want?" "To know how you treated people," Helena said. "Your teachers, your neighbors, strangers, the communities around you. They already expected your academic performance to be strong." "That wasn't the question." "What was the question?" Malik asked softly. Edwin's answer came without hesitation. "Why?" The words sat in the air between them, quiet, heavy, honest. "Why?" Edwin repeated. "Did you give away the only dinner you could afford? Why did you stay to help two people who appeared to have nothing to offer in return? Why did you not hesitate even though the gesture cost you comfort? We wanted to know whether your kindness was convenience or conviction." Malik felt something twist inside his chest, a mix of confusion, embarrassment, and disbelief. "So you pretended to be stranded? You pretended to need my help?" Edwin's expression softened. "We never meant to deceive you to cause harm, but we did need to understand something we could not learn from paperwork." Malik shook his head slowly. "You lied to me." "Yes," Helena said quietly, "and for that, we are sincerely sorry." The apology landed with surprising weight. It did not erase the sting, but it acknowledged it. Edwin continued, "We evaluate leadership through behavior. And last night, Malik, you showed leadership. Not the kind that stands on stages, but the kind that stands quietly in moments that matter." Helena opened the folder. Malik saw printed pages, school records, handwritten notes from neighbors, brief transcripts from the diner, even a short statement from the librarian, Mr. Howell, describing Malik as reliable, respectful, and selfless. "We spent 84 hours reviewing your life," Helena said, "and then one stormy night confirming what the evidence suggested. You are exactly the kind of person we have been looking for." Malik stared down at his own name printed on paper, feeling as though he were reading about a stranger who wore his face. What does that mean?" he asked quietly. Edwin exchanged a glance with Helena, then spoke with deliberate calm. "It means we would like to make you an offer, a significant one." Helena slid a second document toward him, a letter written on thick paper with an embossed gold seal. "It is a full scholarship," she explained. "Tuition, housing, meals, books, and living expenses covered for 4 full years at any accredited university you choose." The words didn't register at first. Malik blinked at the page, feeling the way someone might feel if a door to another world suddenly opened in their own living room. "All 4 years?" he murmured. "Yes," Helena replied. "Every expense. You would not need to work during the school year unless you chose to." Malik's breath caught. The thought of not needing his dishwashing job, of not arranging his dreams around the cost of bus fare, felt unreal. "But that is only the beginning," Edwin added gently. "During summers, you would intern at our community centers across the state. You would learn nonprofit management, community development, and program leadership. You would gain the skills to eventually run your own center." Malik shook his head slowly. "I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you care," Helena said simply, "and because you act on that care." Principal Dawson cleared his throat, adding, "Malik, opportunities like this are extremely rare, but so are people who qualify for them." Malik looked between the adults, his heart beating in uneven thumps. Something inside him swirled. Hope, fear, disbelief. "But what if I don't deserve it?" he whispered. Edwin's expression softened. "None of us earn our opportunities alone, but you have earned our trust, and you have earned our attention." Malik's thoughts spiraled quietly. He wanted college more than anything, but he had never believed the path could open this wide. It frightened him. It thrilled him. It made him wonder whether his life might be larger than the diner, the walk home, the taped windows, and the heavy weight of scarcity. And yet, another thought pulsed under all the others. "You watched me," he said, not accusing, just stating. "You tested me." "Yes," Helena said softly, "but we are asking you now, respectfully, to decide your future with full knowledge. That choice is yours." The room fell into silence. Outside the office door, students laughed and lockers slammed shut. Life continued as though nothing extraordinary was unfolding just feet away. Inside, however, everything had shifted. Malik stared at the offer in front of him. He had given away one warm dinner plate, and this was the echo returning to him. The offer letter lay between them like a quiet ripple in calm water, its gold seal catching glints of afternoon light through the blinds. Malik stared at it without touching it, afraid that if he lifted it too quickly, it might vanish, or worse, change back into the napkin he had handed away the night before. His heart thudded with a strange mixture of fear, confusion, and a softness he didn't yet know how to name. Edwin watched him with patient eyes. "Malik," he said gently, "I know this is a great deal to take in, but I want you to understand something before we go any further." He leaned back slightly. "You didn't buy dinner for a wealthy man last night. You bought dinner for someone you believed had nothing." Malik swallowed. "It wasn't about money." "That," Edwin replied, "is exactly why we're here." Helena opened the leather folder again and carefully slid out another set of documents. Blueprints this time, their edges crisp and clean. She turned them around so they faced Malik. "These," she said quietly, "are plans for a community development center, a very large one, almost $30 million allocated for the site, including $27 million for construction and $11 million placed aside to keep the center running year after year." Malik blinked. The words felt unreal. $30 million? He whispered. "Nearly," Helena clarified, her voice soft and even. "It is an investment, one we intend to make in a neighborhood that needs opportunity, not pity." Principal Dawson leaned forward. "They want to build it on the Riverside Mall site, Malik." Malik turned sharply. The Riverside Mall, the place he passed every day, the place he had described to Helena the night before, the place he imagined could one day rise again. He stared at the blueprint, recognizing nothing and everything at once. The outline of the old structure hidden beneath the new sketches, the shape of the land he had grown up walking beside. "You said something last night," Helena continued. "Something about turning forgotten spaces into places that matter. We've been evaluating communities across the state, and after reviewing our data and your neighborhood's needs, we decided to focus here. The storm simply presented an unexpected chance to meet you sooner." Malik shook his head slowly, unable to make the pieces fit neatly. "So all of this was already planned before I gave you my dinner?" "The project was planned," Edwin said, "but the leadership was not." "What do you mean?" Edwin let out a quiet breath. "We do not drop massive investments into communities without local leaders who are willing, prepared, and capable of guiding them. Money can build walls, Malik, but people build trust." Helena added, "We weren't looking for someone with polished credentials. We were looking for someone whose instincts were anchored in service." Edwin's voice grew more personal. "When you handed us your meal, the only one you had saved for 4 days, it told us something about who you are. Not what you want to be, but who you are." Malik's chest tightened. He looked down at his hands resting in his lap. Rough, tired hands shaped by dish soap and early mornings. "But you watched me," he said in a low voice. "You gathered information about me. You staged a situation to see how I'd behave. You pretended to be people you weren't." Helena lowered her eyes. "We did. And we owe you honesty about that. Our methods are imperfect. They have been criticized before. But we were not trying to trick you for entertainment, Malik. We were searching for someone whose kindness is rooted in choice, not performance." Malik's gaze lifted. "Do you test everyone like this?" "No," Edwin answered. "Not everyone. But for certain leadership roles, we observe how individuals treat others before they know who we are." Malik absorbed this, a quiet pressure building behind his ribs. He couldn't decide whether he felt honored or violated, or both at once. Helena softened her tone further. "The moment we saw you act without hesitation, we stopped analyzing whether you fit a mold. You became the mold." He didn't know how to respond. The blueprint paper blurred slightly beneath his gaze, its neat lines bending under the weight of his thoughts. Then Edwin said something that made Malik's breath catch. "We want you to train with us. In the summers during college, you'll work at our centers across the state. After you graduate, we'd like you to return here as an assistant director. A salaried position, steady income, benefits, the kind of stability most young adults don't get right away." Malik blinked. A salary? How much? "It would begin around $72,000 per year," Edwin said, slowly and respectfully, as though knowing the number might hit hard. "After 2 years, if you and the board agree, you would become the full director, with earnings close to $98,000. $98,000. Malik almost laughed at the impossibility of it. That number sounded like 3 different lifetimes away from his small world of walking to work and taping the windows shut each winter. "But you must understand," Helena said, lifting her eyes. "This cannot be about the money." Malik nodded slowly. "I know." "Good," she said. "Because if your motivation ever becomes status or self-interest, the center's purpose will unravel. People will sense it. Communities feel the truth long before they hear it." Malik let out a long breath. His head felt full of clouds moving in too many directions at once. "I need time," he whispered, "to think, to talk to my grandmother, to understand what this means." "Of course," Edwin replied immediately. "This is not an offer you rush. We want you to choose it, not stumble into it." Principal Dawson stood. "Take the day, Malik. Take as many as you need." Malik rose from his chair, though his legs felt unsteady. The Larksons stood as well. Edwin extended his hand once more. "You gave a stranger a hot meal on a cold night," he said softly. "Not to impress anyone, not to gain anything. You simply saw need and met it. That is leadership, Malik. True leadership." Malik shook his hand, though his mind was still far away. As he stepped out of the office into the hallway, noise washed over him. Students laughing, lockers slamming, the world rolling forward as though his life hadn't just shifted off its axis. He held the scholarship letter against his chest. Somewhere behind him, Edwin's voice echoed in his memory. "You bought dinner for a stranger like me, but the real question is why?" Malik walked slowly, the hall stretching long and bright before him. He didn't have the answer yet, but something inside him whispered that he was about to find out. Warmth spread slowly across Malik's chest as Principal Dawson spoke, but it was a complicated warmth, tangled with fear and disbelief. He stared at the blueprint again, at the clinic, the computer labs, the open lobby filled with natural light. It was like seeing a dream drawn with perfect lines and measured angles, a dream he had only ever whispered to himself on long walks home. "It feels too big," Malik murmured, "like something meant for someone else." Principal Dawson tilted his head. "Someone else? Someone with money? Someone with smoother hands? Someone with a head start?" Malik didn't answer, because yes, that was exactly what he meant. His hands were rough from dish soap, his shoes nearly worn through, his freezer nearly empty. He did not look like the kind of person who directed multi-million-dollar projects. He looked like the kind of person who passed such buildings by and wondered what it would feel like to belong inside. Miss Evelyn reached over and cupped his cheek. "Baby, the world has a bad habit of acting like poor folks don't dream big. But I've watched you dream since you were 5. And this?" She tapped the blueprint. "This is just the world finally catching up. Still, Doubt tugged at him. "What if I mess it up?" he whispered. "What if I get scared and freeze? What if I don't know what to do? What if people expect too much from me? What if you succeed?" Principal Dawson interrupted gently. Malik blinked. "What if," Dawson continued, "you become exactly the kind of leader this neighborhood has needed for 20 years? What if this opportunity becomes the reason children here grow up believing they can attend college? What if your grandmother no longer has to travel 3 bus transfers to see a doctor? What if you change things simply by showing up?" Malik lowered his gaze. "I'm just me." "And that," Dawson said firmly, "is the point." Miss Evelyn chuckled softly. "The boy who helped Mrs. Langley with her groceries yesterday? The boy who fixes our neighbor's fence every spring? The boy who hands out sandwiches during the church drive even when he hasn't eaten breakfast?" She shook her head. "Baby, if kindness was a job description, you'd already be the supervisor." Despite himself, Malik laughed. A small, fragile sound, but real. Principal Dawson leaned back. "You know, Malik, systems fail communities not because people are unworthy, but because no one inside the system listens to the people living outside it. You already understand the community better than any outsider with a resume." Malik thought about that. He thought about the kids in his neighborhood, kids who brought broken pencils to school, kids who sat in class but never raised their hands because they believed their voices didn't matter. He thought of the old men who gathered on worn-out corners because they had nowhere else to go, of the parents who worked double shifts and were still behind on rent. And he thought of the abandoned mall, its cracked windows, its graffiti, its emptiness. "What would I even do as director?" he asked quietly. "Learn," Dawson said. "Listen. Build relationships. Create programs that actually matter. Help people feel seen. And you won't be alone," Miss Evelyn added. "Good leaders don't carry the world on their shoulders. They carry it with other people." Malik swallowed hard. "But what if I never asked to be a leader?" Miss Evelyn smiled. "Child, sometimes the world chooses for you, but it's choosing for a reason." Silence settled in the room, soft and deep. Outside, a car moved slowly down Elm Street, its headlights passing across the window like a brief sweep of light across an old stage. Malik's heart felt too large in his chest, like it had been pulled open by invisible hands. Principal Dawson packed his folder. "The Larksons asked me not to pressure you. They want your answer to come from understanding, not from shock." He paused, then added gently, "But opportunities like this don't appear by accident. Something in you made them see possibility." When he left, Miss Evelyn and Malik remained in the quiet living room, the blueprint still glowing faintly under the lamp's warm light. "What are you thinking, baby?" she asked. Malik stared at the lines on the page, the future drawn in ink, waiting for him. "I'm thinking," he said slowly, "that I want to help people. I've always wanted that, but this is so much bigger than anything I imagined." "That's because your imagination has been trapped inside survival," she whispered. "But you're allowed to want more now." He took a deep breath. "What if the Larksons expect me to be perfect?" "They don't," Miss Evelyn said firmly. "They expect you to be honest. They expect you to care. And they expect you to grow." "But what if I disappoint them?" Malik asked, his voice barely a whisper. Miss Evelyn shook her head gently. "Baby, disappointment comes from pretending to be something you're not. You won't do that. You will show up as Malik, the boy who gives even when he has little, the boy who notices needs before anyone asks, The boy who saw a dead mall and imagined a living community. That boy doesn't disappoint. Malik rubbed his hands together slowly. They still smelled faintly of dish soap. He wondered if they would always smell like that, even if he one day became director of something large and important. He wondered if that was a good thing. A thought formed slowly inside him, delicate but clear. What if, he said aloud, this whole thing is the chance I've been waiting for without knowing it? Miss Evelyn nodded, eyes shining. Then don't let fear make the decision for you. He sat back against the couch, closed his eyes, and breathed. Long, deep, steady breaths. He saw the abandoned mall, not in its current brokenness, but in the way it could be. Lights on, people gathered, children laughing in hallways that once echoed with emptiness. He saw his grandmother walking less painfully because a clinic was nearby. He saw adults learning computer skills. He saw a kitchen training program where people like Big Frank might teach cooking classes. He saw possibility blooming where nothing had bloomed in decades. He opened his eyes. I don't know if I'm ready, he said softly. But maybe I'm willing. Miss Evelyn smiled. Willing is the beginning of ready. And as she turned off the lamp beside her, the blueprint remained on the table, quiet, patient, and waiting. Malik woke before dawn, though this time it wasn't habit that stirred him. It was something else, a low, humming awareness under his ribs, like a door inside him had been left half open through the night. He lay still for several minutes, staring at the faint pattern of shadows on his ceiling. The house felt different this morning, not because anything had changed outside, but because something had shifted quietly inside him. A scholarship, a leadership path, a center worth almost $30 million. His name spoken with purpose by strangers who seemed to know him better than he knew himself. He sat up slowly. Miss Evelyn was already awake in her recliner, wrapped in her faded blue blanket. The oxygen tank at her side made its soft, rhythmic hiss. She looked over at him, her smile a gentle curve. You're thinking loud again, she said. Malik rubbed his face. Did I keep you up? No, baby. My body wakes when it wants. But your mind was working so hard. I'm surprised the roof didn't lift off. He laughed softly, then walked over and kissed her forehead. I'm sorry. She patted his hand. Never apologize for growing. He sat on the floor beside her chair, leaning his head against her knee the way he did when he was little. The quiet between them stretched comfortably. Miss Evelyn, he whispered, what if I say yes, and the whole thing falls apart? She rested her hand lightly on his hair. Then you learn, and you start again. But what if people depend on me? What if they expect me to fix everything? They won't expect you to fix everything, she said. They'll expect you to show up, to listen, to care. And you already do all those things. He closed his eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of her lavender lotion. I'm scared. Good, she said softly. You should be. Fear means you understand the size of the blessing. Only foolish people walk into greatness without shaking a little. When Malik left the house for school, the world outside felt sharper, clearer. The sky was a pale morning blue, and the sun was only just beginning to brush the tops of the houses with color. His backpack felt heavier than usual, not because of books or homework, but because of what it carried inside. A future he had not chosen yet, folded neatly into an envelope. The walk to school took him past the same cracked sidewalks, the same leaning fences, the same boarded-up storefronts. Yet today, everything looked like it was waiting for an answer. He passed Riverside Mall. The huge, empty structure loomed over the parking lot, its windows smeared with grime, its sign missing several letters. But as Malik paused and looked at it, he saw something else layered over the decay, a flicker of what could be. Light spilling through new windows, people entering through wide doors, children playing, adults studying. Patients visiting a clinic without fear of long bus rides or unaffordable bills. The mall had been dead for years, but suddenly it looked almost alive. He continued walking, shaken by the image his own mind had created. At school, the hallways buzzed with morning chaos. Lockers slammed, backpacks thudded onto floors. Snippets of conversations floated through the air like fast-moving birds. "Did you finish the assignment?" "My mom said the power went out again last night." "I can't believe the cafeteria raised prices." Normal problems, everyday noise. But Malik felt out of step, as though he were walking through a dream inside a place he knew too well. Tariq spotted him immediately. "Yo, Malik!" He jogged over, waving his phone. "You will not believe what I found. Bro, there are articles about the Larkson Trust going back years." Malik blinked. "Articles?" Tariq nodded vigorously. "Yeah, they've built centers in 4 other cities. Real ones, big ones, with clinics and job programs and everything. People say those centers turned whole neighborhoods around." A strange heat spread through Malik's chest. "For real?" "I'm serious," Tariq said, lowering his voice dramatically. "Like, crime went down, graduation rates went up, families got jobs. These folks don't play." Malik stared at him. He wasn't sure whether to feel comforted or overwhelmed. "There's more," Tariq added. "Check this out." He turned the phone around to show Malik a video clip. It was a news segment about the Larkson Trust. Helena appeared on screen first, confident, graceful, speaking about community partnership. Then Edwin appeared, explaining the idea that leadership grows from compassion, not credentials. Malik's stomach tightened. He watched the man on the screen and realized it was the same man who had shivered in a booth while sipping cold tea from a chipped diner mug. "Wild, right?" Tariq said. Malik nodded. "Yeah, wild." During English class, he could barely focus. The words on the page seemed to slide over each other. Ms. Hartwell noticed. "Malik," she whispered as she passed his desk. "Are you all right?" He hesitated. "I think I'm being asked to do something big." Her eyes softened instantly. "Bigger than you feel?" He nodded. "That's how you know it's worth doing," she said. "Dreams should feel slightly too large. Otherwise, they're not dreams. They're just errands." Her words settled in him like warm clay. After school, Malik walked to the diner for his shift. This time, he didn't head directly to the dish station. He stood for a moment near table 7, staring at the booth that had unknowingly opened the door to everything happening now. He heard footsteps behind him. "You're early," Jenna said, sliding in beside him. "Couldn't sit still," he admitted. She studied his expression. "They offered you something, didn't they?" He hesitated. "Yeah." "A scholarship?" He nodded. "A job? A program?" He nodded again. Jenna let out a low whistle. "I knew something was up the moment that man pulled out that fancy wallet after pretending he didn't have one." She nudged him gently. "So what's wrong? You don't look excited, you look terrified." "I am," Malik confessed. "Why?" He exhaled slowly. "Because what if I'm not enough?" "What if they made a mistake?" Jenna scoffed. "Malik, rich people don't spend this kind of time on accidents. They saw something in you, and so do we." She looked at him, not with pity, but with certainty. "You gave them your dinner," she said. "Maybe now it's time to give yourself a chance." Malik swallowed hard. The words landed exactly where they needed to. He looked at his reflection in the diner window. The same boy as yesterday, with the same tired eyes and the same worn shoes. But today, he looked slightly more possible. 18 months passed, though for the people of Elm Street, it felt more like the world had exhaled and drawn a brand new breath. Seasons shifted. The old Riverside Mall came down, wall by wall, until the lot stood cleared like a field waiting for a harvest that had never been planted before. Malik sometimes stood at the edge of the construction fence after school, watching cranes swing through the sky like patient giants, lifting beams that would one day carry the weight of hope. The Larkson Community Center rose slowly at first, then all at once, the way new buildings often do, bare frames becoming hallways, bare concrete becoming bright floors, sketches becoming doorways and windows and classrooms. Malik spent his first summer internship in a different city, shadowing directors in centers that had already changed thousands of lives. He learned grant writing, community mediation, program design, budgeting and soft numbers, and how to hold conversations with families who had stopped trusting systems long ago. He came home different, still Malik, still humble, still walking like he didn't want to draw attention, but with eyes that saw possibilities rather than limitations. When he returned for the second summer internship, Helena greeted him with a warm hug and said, "Your leadership has caught up with your heart." Now, 18 months after the night he gave away his dinner, the center stood completed. Not imagined, not sketched, built. The first morning sunlight reflected across its long glass windows, turning them gold. And the doors opened. The first person to walk through the clinic entrance was Mrs. Langley, soft-voiced, careful on her feet, clutching her appointment card like a ticket to a better future. Her blood pressure was checked, her sugar levels reviewed, her medications adjusted so sensibly that she left in tears of relief, whispering over and over, "I don't have to ride 3 buses anymore." In the first 7 months, the clinic saw more than 900 patients, elderly residents who had skipped checkups for years, young mothers who finally had a place to bring their children without missing work, men who had never been to a doctor before because the cost had always felt like a locked gate. Miss Evelyn was among the earliest to visit. The doctors gently adjusted her diabetes treatment. They helped her manage her arthritis with modern therapies. And one quiet afternoon, Malik stood beside her as she handed back her oxygen tank, no longer needed. The nurse's smile was bright enough that Malik almost forgot to breathe. "You're walking lighter," he whispered to Miss Evelyn as they stepped out into the sunlight. "That's because I finally can," she answered, with a laugh that sounded years younger. Across the hall, the computer labs filled with people who had once felt the digital world was too far from reach. Adults learned how to type, how to create resumes, how to navigate online forms, how to send emails. Mrs. Carter from down the street became excellent at inventory spreadsheets. Jerome's mother discovered she had an eye for graphic design and soon earned her first small business contract designing menus for a nearby cafe. In the job training wing, sparks lit the air each morning from the construction program. The welding class sent up showers of light as trainees learned skills that would soon land them real apprenticeships. In the culinary classroom, Big Frank, who once grumbled about the economy and broken margins at Doyle's Diner, now stood proudly at a stainless steel counter, teaching single parents and teenagers how to run a real commercial kitchen. And the center's library, small but warm, filled with students from Roosevelt High every afternoon. Some studied in quiet rooms, some worked with tutors, some simply sat in soft chairs, reading stories without needing to worry about the noise of crowded homes or broken streetlights. Roosevelt High's overall test scores rose by 25% in the first year after the center opened. Not because the school magically changed, but because the students finally had support that reached into the hours after school ended. Crime in the neighborhood dropped by nearly 1/5. Not because more officers patrolled the streets, but because people now had places to be, jobs to seek, skills to learn, and hope to protect. Local newspapers called this transformation the Malik effect. Although the trust used the more formal name, the Larkson Community Impact Model, residents ignored that title entirely. They said Malik changed things, even when he insisted he hadn't done it alone. Malik's office was small. He asked for the smallest one, but the walls were filled with framed photographs, the construction crews breaking ground, the first graduating culinary class smiling with their certificates the day the clinic opened, and a picture of Miss Evelyn standing beside the new garden in front of the building. He was now the assistant director, earning a salary he still hadn't fully gotten used to. He walked the hallways each morning with a notebook tucked under his arm, listening to concerns, shaking hands, learning names, fixing things quietly before anyone had to ask. One afternoon, Sandy from Doyle's Diner called him. "Malik," she said breathlessly, "there's a young couple here, Hispanic, 2 little kids. Their car broke down. They don't have money for dinner. They're trying not to cry. It reminded me of that night with you." Malik didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he said. He walked through the diner doors exactly the way he had 18 months earlier, except this time he wasn't exhausted from hunger. He wasn't carrying fear in his pockets. He wasn't unsure of where he belonged. He approached the table. The couple looked up. Miguel and Rosa, their children curled close, eyes tired from long days and longer worries. Without a word, Malik placed a warm tray of food in front of them. "This one's on me," he said softly. Miguel began to protest. "No, sir, we don't want—" Malik shook his head gently. "I've been in your place. Let me help." The couple stared at him, confused but grateful. Malik sat with them, listening to their story. A lost job, a broken transmission, savings stretched thin, fear tightening around their days like a rope. He listened carefully. Then he handed Miguel his business card. "Come by the center on Monday," he said. "We have a construction program looking for trainees. And Rosa, we have a family services office that helps people find part-time roles with childcare support." Miguel turned the card over. "Mr. Carter, why would you help us?" Malik smiled a small, steady smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Because someone helped me when I had nothing but a dinner plate to offer." The couple didn't know how to respond, but their eyes glistened, and hope, new, fragile, trembling, settled into their expressions. As Malik walked out of the diner, the air outside felt warm with memory. Not the heavy memory of struggle, but the kind that keeps a story alive long after the moment that began it. He understood now that kindness was not a transaction. It was a seed. And seeds, when tended, grew into forests. He closed his notebook for the day, exhaled softly, and walked toward the center glowing beneath the evening light. He did not feel scared anymore. He felt ready. The evening sky over Elm Street glowed like a slow-burning ember, the kind that clings to the horizon long after the sun itself has slipped away. Malik walked home from the center with an easy stride, his thoughts settling like dust after a long day. The center had been open just over a year now, and every day still felt like a quiet miracle unfolding in small, steady breaths. As he reached the porch, he saw Miss Evelyn sitting in her favorite chair, wrapped in her soft blue blanket. The oxygen tank was long gone. In its place sat a small basket of folded laundry she insisted on doing herself, even though Malik told her 100 times she didn't need to. "You look tired, baby," she said, even before he sat down beside her. He leaned back against the wooden rail. "Good tired. That's the best kind." They sat together in the fading light, listening to the soft rustle of leaves, the distant laughter of neighborhood kids playing on the sidewalk, the faint hum of life being lived. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Miss Evelyn turned her head. "You helped someone again today." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Malik answered. "A young family at the diner. Their car broke down. They didn't have money for dinner. And you thought of yourself all those months ago." "I did," he admitted. "Good," she whispered. "Because blessings don't end. They echo. And you can choose whether that echo is loud or quiet." Malik exhaled softly. "I think I finally understand what Edwin meant, about why they did what they did." Miss Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what's that?" "He said leadership is what you do when nobody's watching." Malik paused. "But I think it's also what you do after someone does watch, after someone gives you a chance, after someone trusts you with something bigger than yourself." Miss Evelyn gave a satisfied nod. "You grew into the gift. That's all anyone can ask." A warm breeze drifted across the porch, carrying the soft scent of someone grilling 2 houses away. For a moment, the world felt small, safe, whole. "Miss Evelyn," Malik said suddenly, "can I tell you something?" "You can tell me anything." He hesitated. "I'm scared again." Her expression softened. "Scared of what?" He ran his thumb along the grain of the porch railing. "The board asked me if I'd consider applying for the full director position in another year." Miss Evelyn blinked. "Already? Baby, that's fast." "I know, and it feels too soon. Do you want it?" That was the question, wasn't it? The one he had been tucking behind every busy day and long evening and stack of paperwork. "I do," he said finally. "But I'm afraid of becoming someone who forgets where he came from." Miss Evelyn reached out and took his hand, pressing it gently between her palms. "You could never forget. You carry Elm Street in your bones. And as long as you listen before you speak, as long as you remember that helping is a privilege, not a burden, you'll never lose your way." Her voice grew softer. "I know you think you changed because of those people from the trust. But baby, you were always this boy. They just gave you a bigger room to grow in." Malik swallowed a tight, grateful ache in his throat. He had never heard anyone say it quite like that. The next morning, the center buzzed with weekend energy. Children ran along the hallways in soft sneakers. Adults carried coffee cups and folders, and the building hummed like a living heart, pumping purpose into every room. Dr. Santos from the clinic waved as Malik passed. "We have had 30 new patients this week," she said. 30. It is incredible work, Malik." "It's your work too," he replied. Mrs. Carter stuck her head out of the computer lab. "Can you print new flyers for our digital literacy class? They're filling up faster than we can schedule them." "Of course," Malik said. In the vocational wing, Big Frank called from inside the kitchen. "Hey, director," he boomed, laughing. "We need you to taste this stew. These rookies need an honest judge." Assistant director, Malik corrected with a grin. But he stepped inside anyway, letting the aroma of simmering herbs fold around him like a warm coat. The center's rhythm was a song now, steady, familiar, layered with voices that had once felt silenced. Malik moved through it like someone moving through his own home. As he headed back toward his office, he saw Helena and Edwin standing in the lobby. They looked almost exactly as they did the day he first saw their true faces. Calm, quietly elegant, eyes filled with that same searching warmth. But today, something else lingered in their expressions. Pride. "Malik," Helena said, stepping forward, "we came to review the annual report." "And to see you," Edwin added, shaking his hand firmly. "How does it feel?" Helena asked gently, "to walk into a building you once only imagined?" Malik looked around. The clinic, the classrooms, the library, the sunlight streaming through tall windows. "It feels like the world is bigger than I knew," he said. "But also, closer." Edwin nodded. "That's what community is." They walked together down the hallway, stopping to greet staff and visitors. Children waved, adults nodded respectfully. Malik felt the quiet power of being a part of something that wasn't his alone, but which he had helped breathe into being. When they reached his office, Edwin closed the door behind them. "Malik," he began, "we have something to ask you, something we've been discussing with the board." Malik felt his pulse quicken. "We believe," Edwin continued, "that in one more year you will be ready to assume the role of full director. Not just here, but as a regional leader, helping design centers in other cities." Malik stared at them, stunned. "Why me?" Helena smiled. "Because you haven't forgotten the boy who gave away his only meal." "And because," Edwin added, "you've made thousands of choices since then that only confirm who you are." Malik sat slowly, overwhelmed but steady. "I don't know if I'm worthy," he whispered. Edwin placed a hand on his shoulder. "Worthiness," he said, "is not a destination. It is a practice." That evening, the center held a community dinner. Families gathered under warm lights. Children carried plates of rice and chicken. Volunteers poured juice and ladled soup. Music played softly from a speaker near the corner. Malik stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold. Sandy from the diner arrived with her son. Mrs. Langley hugged him tightly. Dr. Santos waved from across the room. Big Frank handed out brownies. Miss Evelyn, seated comfortably at a front table, lifted her hand and motioned for him to join her. As Malik walked toward her, the room felt full in a way that had nothing to do with numbers. It felt full of stories, of second chances, of quiet victories knitted together by small acts of kindness that echoed and echoed and echoed. Miss Evelyn held his hand as he sat. "Look around you, baby," she whispered. "This is what one dinner can become." He swallowed hard. She leaned closer, her voice a warm murmur. "Kindness," she said, "is the only thing in this world that multiplies without dividing." Malik looked around again, the laughter, the lights, the joy, and felt something settle in him like a tree rooting itself deeply and permanently. The circle had closed, but also a new one had opened, and he was ready to walk through it.